Welcome to the Allentown Art Museum. I am Abby Simmons, the Adult and College Program Coordinator and organizer of this event, celebrating our Stephen Antonakos exhibition, The Room Chapel, and the model for the Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder, curated by Eleni, the museum's Vice President of Curatorial Affairs. Describing Antonakos, the renowned New York art critic and historian Dr. Irving Sandler said, "Stephen Antonakos has been the pioneer in the use of neon in fine art for 50 years. A major achievement has been his engagement with architectural form and space. Essentially a classicist in the constructivist tradition, he has revealed the poetry of neon." This is the first ever event to feature readings of Antonakos' own words. Our readers today are Eleni Mylonas, Cordy Ryman, Rosie Lopeman, Father Vasilios, Hanne Tierney, Evangelia Antonakos, Joseph Masheck, and Jen Hitchings. Eleni Mylonas is an internationally respected artist and photographer with a distinguished history of inventive exhibitions, sometimes involving live performance. She and Antonakos were good friends for many years. She will read some statements written in Greece in 2002, a snapshot of the whole man.
Notes from September 2002. With all my work, I hope to reach the inner person. During our time on earth, each of us is a conduit. The things and events of the world pass into us, and in our own ways we reform them and return them back into the world. I believe there is human meaning in basic abstract forms, in their specific proportions and placements, and in their architectural and spatial contexts. I try to reach for experiences like the high, pure joy of early childhood. I want the physical, emotional, and imaginative excitement that lifts the here and now to the level of that early, unforgettable, infinite joy of first discovering the world. I am a realist. I am quite aware of today's and yesterday's injustices and losses. The goal is to live with energy, to fight the tragedies. I want, as long as I live, to aim for those strong, still unrevealed possibilities which life holds for us all. The tools which we have for this are our spirits, our energies, and the infinite excitements of the natural world. The skies, the trees, the road, the buildings, the smiles of all people, the noise of the young, the heat of the day, the great dark silence of the night.
Cordy Ryman's work was a favorite of Antonakos's. His dynamic installations unifying sculpture and painting have been exhibited in New York and broadly across the country. He will read from the artist's original 1996 notes for The Room Chapel.
My history with rooms probably begins with a very small church in St. Nicholas, the village where I was born and where I spent my early childhood. Our houses were very simple and people worked very hard. But to enter the chapel was to enter another world. Being inside it was like being plunged deep inside my own feelings and finding a paradise at the same time. The rich colors, the gold, the heightened atmosphere all moved me immensely. I felt more myself there than anywhere else. Later, as a young artist in New York, I often worked with open and closed boxes, deep frames, and other kinds of enclosures that functioned for me like tiny rooms, containers of feelings. By the time I was exhibiting at the Fishback Gallery in the mid-60s, the formal and spatial relationships between my work and its architectural contexts were as important as the relationships within a work. In the early 70s, I started large freestanding rooms indoors and outdoors for museum exhibitions around the country. In the 80s, I made a room in Japan that had special meaning for me. The way the space itself held the light there gave me a feeling that I remembered from childhood, a sense of being completely inside myself. For me, it was a turning point. The first concepts of my chapels came soon after. With the current exhibition, I'm hoping to provide a place which visually and spatially may help us remember or rediscover our inner selves, our own individual thoughts, feelings, and spirits. It is a place for contemplation in an atmosphere of openness. I see room as a quiet place where light and space can be seen and experienced for themselves.
Rosie Lopeman is a painter and photographer, and she teaches drawing at the New York Studio School. As an associate at the Antonakos studios, she has an active and valued voice in its day-to-day workings. The room chapel's two 1989 neon panels are titled St. Nicholas and the Transfiguration. The following notes address the artist's sources for this important series and his use of gold leaf.
The scale of each panel, its surfaces, the choice of the glowing neon colors around its edges, and its position in the room are all related to each other and connected to the space around them and the viewer. The experience is not one set thing, it changes. In daylight, the surfaces are clearly physically present. If the light in the room is very strong, it can reduce the colored halo to a mere whisper. Yet, in slightly dimmer light, these amorphous colored glows not only dominate in strength and area, they transform the physical panel, making it mysteriously dark and ambiguous. There is always a tension between what we see and what we know. The goal of the work is difficult to name. It is a kind of inner brightness. The struggle is to find ways to reach this condition visually. The process is perceptual. It is based on how I see light and darkness and form. My way of working is to stand at the edge of what I know and look into the darkness. Slowly, quietly, ideas emerge and become part of what I do know. This reaching inward is really the root of my work. It does not directly address the social or political world we live in, although I am concerned. It simply is my nature to look inward, and I think it is our inner qualities that inform our active lives. I'm not interested in a portrait, and obviously I'm working outside of the traditions of religious art, but not completely outside. What I am after is what I believe the icon makers wanted, to get to the essence of a holiness that we can sense here and now. The lasting and higher communication is what comes between the lines. It was the possibility of this kind of heightened awareness that led me to the chapels. I am discovering in Gold Leaf more visual and spatial qualities than I had anticipated. When I began to work with neon, I knew I was entering a world of many unexpected possibilities. And more than 50 years later, I'm still finding new ideas with neon. With Gold Leaf, again, the material is richer and more various than you may think. Besides the variations related to changes in the natural light, other surprising perceptual changes occur. Gold is extremely responsive to viewing angle and distance. The surfaces are not simply flat and reflective, they seem to have depths. You see changing varieties of brightness, color, and legibility in the gold leaf grids as you move through the room. Along with the possibility of cultural meanings, gold is so powerful and ever-changing in its reflective properties, so mysterious, delicate, and various in its depths.
Father Vasilios is Archimandriti at the Greek Orthodox Church of St. John the Baptist in New York. His long journey includes service as a novice monk at the Holy Monastery of St. Catherine at Mount Sinai, and for 5 years as the second priest of the Archdiocesan Cathedral of the Holy Trinity in Manhattan. From his first Sunday at St. John the Baptist, he and Antonakos formed a lasting rapport. The artist's memory notes that he will read for us today are a rare account of the artist becoming himself, a direct, undeviating course.
I remember how dark it was inside the houses in the little village of Ios Nikolaos, St. Nicholas, in Laconia, Greece, where we lived before my family immigrated to New York. Then naturally, the whole world was dark, and the few tiny lights in our small houses seemed to join with the stars in the immense but very clear blackness of the night sky. At dawn, the sun rose rather quickly. We were up and about to see the day begin. From below the rim of dark mountains, the glow would start. Light blue, then pink, then yellow, then an orange red, as Oilios, the sun, huge and soft, like a living thing, came up to light the world. Around 1932 and 1933, in New York, my older brother Peter, who was also interested in drawing, was drawing at the kitchen table, and I was looking over his shoulder. Every time he would draw, I would just watch him, never ask any questions, just watch him. And so my early interest in drawing came from him. During my 2 years of service in the Army, I kept sketchbooks, not really knowing what I would do actually as an artist, but knowing I would find the way. By 1950, I had my own studio, and I used the New York galleries and the Museum of Modern Art as my teachers, constantly looking at new work, working in 3 dimensions. With my assemblages in the 50s, I sometimes painted them, the strongest red-orange I could find. I wanted the most intense impact possible. Something happened then in my mind. I realized that one color could transform the shapes, that the forms could be seen as the color, not just through the color. This happened close to my discovery of neon. Of course, it really was a powerhouse understanding this, as neons had an intense red-orange I had been working with. The intense color and its ability to create form really came together when I started making squares and circles in neon. It was like learning to see the world in a new spatial way.
Hanne Tierney is a renowned puppetry artist whose subjects range from Gertrude Stein to 2nd century Chinese poetess Tsai Yen. She is founder and director of the community-based gallery 5 Miles, now in its 21st year in Crown Heights. She and Antonakos were good friends for many years. She will read his responses to an Athenian journalist interview questions. The questions will be read by Jen Hitchings.
You have emerged as one of the most well-paid Greek artists. Does this fact make any sense to you? Is it a kind of honor for you?
I have no way of knowing if this is true, but I very much doubt it. No, the issue does not make sense to me, because in general, I find so much in modern life based on the market model that should not be. Healthcare, for instance, and culture really should be considered for what they are, not for any profitability. I am interested in art, how different artists work and develop through the years, in seeing new work and old work and experiencing art as one of life's necessities. Honor is another matter entirely and is based on very different values.
Do you think that the stock market of art influences either positively or negatively the work of an artist?
Yes, for some people, I suppose it will, but not always and not exclusively. There will always be people for whom business is a very important measure of success in life, but I'm not one of them. My idea is to live in a way that I can stay in touch with my past and with my sources within myself and outside myself in a balanced way, so that I can continue to make work. This is what is necessary for me in life.
If you were living in Greece, do you think that your work would be different in a way?
This is a very good question, very deep. I have thought about it a lot, of course. Yes, I think my work would be different, but I cannot exactly say how. There's the element of fate, after all, my parents immigrating to New York and my early years as an artist just after abstract expressionism's decade and with all the openness and excitement of the late 1950s and 1960s in New York. I do think that there is a real echo of Greek culture in me and in my work, which living and working in New York has never erased. And I think this is true for some other strong Greek artists who live and show outside of Greece.
Are you interested in exhibiting your work in Greece? And do you find pleasure in it?
Oh yes, of course. I always want to, because in Greece, the basic themes in my work are felt and taken in naturally. And yes, this is a great pleasure. Pleasure is an important word. Pleasure, beauty. Those words are so common, but they are essential for the creative life. They both mean fulfillment.
Do you prefer taking up big projects like the underground metro stations, or do you find it more interesting to create smaller work?
I really want to do both. The public work is the same to me as the studio work. Of course, when I started working in the late 1940s, I had no idea I would ever make anything larger than 8 feet or so. But when I started working with neon about 10 years later, I realized first that neon can be seen from great distances without losing its definition. And second, that it is inherently spatial. Working with it in interior architectures had naturally led to working with it in exterior architectural settings and to my rooms, to working with the space as well as the physical site. I made these works for years in exhibitions before I ever imagined being commissioned for permanent public works. When those opportunities finally did come, there was one wonderful benefit that came with it: to make work that reached the lives of people who might never see art in museums or galleries. I believe that art can be powerful enough to carry its meaning in public spaces, and this really is a very old idea. The art and architecture of the ancient world was deeply public, binding communities and still allowing for the individual's inner experience.
Evangelia Antonakos, the artist's daughter, is an assistant professor of mathematics and computer science at Bronx Community College, CUNY. She will read the artist's first notes for the Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder. These few handwritten pages manifest the ideas for the chapel as each one came to him.
The Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder. A steel chapel with a tall door and a metal canopy, and 12 crosses on the canopy. Under the canopy, a red glow of neon, having pebbles to step on the floor. And in front of you, a ladder of gold leading up through a blue glow of neon and out of the roof into the heavens. All of this to meditate on your past and present life, enclosed in a not comfortable room, which is the world we live in now, not a comfortable world for most people. To stand and wonder how to be able to climb this ladder. Can I climb it? Emotionally, is my life good enough? Have I been a person that this ladder will hold and allow me to reach the top? Even if the world is hard and difficult, have I lived with others in a way that I deserve to climb this ladder? This is what we should all think and ask ourselves in this chapel. Not comfortable, but hard on the body and the mind. To open us up, to ask ourselves, to be honest to ourselves and to others, honest to bring out the best in us. For most of us, we will never climb this golden ladder. And if we know this, then we should change. Change in a way we live with each other, to care for others as you will want them to care for you, and to think of this golden ladder with you always, to help you. So one day you will be able to climb it and feel most wonderful. Of course, this ladder should be within ourselves all the time, only that this real golden ladder in this hard environment should make us go over about ourselves even more, and if possible, to be by yourself, so as to relax with yourself and within yourself, with no intervention, so as to see yourself as you really are, to change if need be. For you should imagine yourself climbing up the steps and feel honest and relieved. For only then will you know about yourself. For this is my experience of this chapel.
The art historian and critic Joseph Masheck is a former Guggenheim Fellow who received the Distinguished Lifetime Achievement Award for Writing on Art of the College Art Association in 2018. Author of 12 books, consulting editor of the Brooklyn Rail, and a correspondent for the Church of England journal Art and Christianity, Dr. Masheck has long been concerned with questions of art and theology. He will read Antonakos' responses in Zoe Cosmidou's 1997 interview that took place while the Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder was on view at the 47th Venice Biennale. Dr. Cosmidou's questions will be read by Rosie Lopeman.
Why did you choose to show the Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder as your contribution for the Greek Pavilion in the 1997 Venice Biennale?
The idea for the Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder came to me in 1995. That year, I had an iron model with the golden ladder made. Work like this is not just an image. It's something you arrive at after years of living and working, and it's meant to be experienced inwardly and spatially, as well as with your eyes. It seemed natural to exhibit a work with these qualities and that was rooted in Byzantine art, in response to the invitation to represent Greece at the Biennale. The timing was a bit marvelous because Dr. Helen C. Evans's The Glory of Byzantium exhibition had just arrived at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Among its treasures was the icon with the heavenly ladder of John Climax from the Holy Monastery of St. Catherine in Mount Sinai. I want to point out that this 12th century icon that Stephen is citing is a particular glory of the great collection of icons in this ancient monastery on Mount Sinai. Seeing it, he says, brought me great joy. We went to see the show again and again. Also, the monks who were in New York in connection with the exhibition came by to my studio and saw the model of this and other chapels. Their response was very strong and completely sophisticated aesthetically. They were incredible. It was a wonderful experience for me to feel this connection to their world.
Can you talk about the fabrication of the work and how the site in the Giardini del Castello affected your work?
The chapel was fabricated from hot-rolled steel in Greece with the tremendous generosity of Promodos Emphitzoglou. The most crucial element for me as an artist was my site in the Giardini, near the entrance to the Biennale. This site was a very long open rectangle, framed with tall trees, so that there was a sense of approach and arrival toward both the front and the back of the chapel. The area was broad enough to give the right sense of scale for this structure. I also liked the dirt of the ground there and how it related to the loose stones of the floor of the chapel. Grass would have been too polite.
We recognize a blue as well as a red neon square as a major element in that Biennale work. Does it play an equally significant role in your life as in your art?
That's a very perceptive question. The release of the visual into the spatial is one thing this piece is about. These two colors, the red and the blue, which I've used in complete and incomplete geometric forms for so many years, are in a sense the alpha and the omega of my work. They are at the root, and they are elements that I can never come to the end of.
When and how did you discover neon light as an art medium?
I discovered neon walking the streets of New York one night in the late 1950s. As I realized what neon alone could do, how flexible it was a rush to keep up with the ideas it offered, a rush that continues today. My forms do not represent, symbolize, or refer to anything outside of themselves. Such specific correspondences would limit the work's meaning, whereas pure abstraction, liberated from any external references, is capable of saying so much more. My neons relate formally to architecture and space, but they do not represent anything outside themselves.
When did you first make a full-scale room?
The 1968 red neon barrier in the 20 by 30 foot gallery at Fischbach spanned the length of the room at waist height. It was 2 feet square in cross-section. Visitors could enter the room from a door on either side of the work, but they could not cross it. It was a powerhouse.
Do you think that contemporary art conveys a message to the broader public today, more than it did before? Or is it strictly addressed to limited groups and individuals?
Perhaps the diversity of contemporary art today is as historically remarkable as the diversity of its audience. Both have broadened. In every era, there are artists who work not to convey a message about society, but try to find out why we are alive, to look for answers to older questions, and to find ways of connecting the inner and the outer person.
Do you believe that art today can bridge cultural differences?
Oh yes, more than ever with advanced communications. But in a deeper sense, though we are exposed to more, I still feel the most valuable encounter is a direct personal experience, responsiveness across the space between the viewer and the work of art. This encounter engages the eye, the mind, the feelings, the spirit, all that one knows or approaches knowing.
How long have you been designing structures with religious connotations, and what was the incentive for doing so?
Thank you for introducing this subject. I started designing the small chapels in the late 1980s. A turning point occurred with the Chapel of the Saints installation in the old fortress of Rhodes in 1992. The incentive must have been ready inside me, because when the externals, those walls, that space, presented themselves, everything fell into place. My ideas were affected by the atmosphere, the history of the martyrs, and working all alone in that intense interior for 3 months. The unity of that work and that place came like a gift to me.
In your works, light and space create a very unique atmosphere. How would you expect the viewers to experience them?
Well, you have found the essence. Yet light and space remain mysteries to me. I'm constantly surprised here in the studio by what happens to me, how I feel myself in the space of the work. There's a great deal beyond the formal aspect. These aspects can be understood. I don't want to tell people how to experience art, mine or anyone else's. I simply want to try to find for myself ways of putting things together visually so that the possibility for a kind of high consciousness may occur in the spirit, in the experience of the art. We live to reveal life. When I am working, what I'm searching for isn't just an answer to a new site or a new way of continuing a series. I'm working with a certain kind of awareness that involves my senses, my mind, and my feelings, everything that I am and everything that I ever have been. This large awareness is like the lure of a large question I can't put into words. The question itself is part of the answer. I grow into this question, partly seeing and partly blind, with every new work.
Where would you wish your next art project to take place?
I would like to build some meditation chapels in the light, the landscape, and the mindscape of Greece.
Jen Hitchings is a painter who has exhibited locally and in surrounding communities. An experienced gallery manager, her expertise as an associate at the Antonakos studios is much appreciated. She will read today's only text not by the artist, a letter from one of the monks from Mount Sinai who visited the studio in 1997 and praised the model for the Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder.
St. Catherine's Monastery, 18 Medan El Deher, Cairo, 12 June 1998. Dear Stephen, the catalogs that you sent to Father Daniel and I are most impressive. May I take this opportunity of congratulating you on your artistic accomplishment. The influence that St. John Climacos has on you is something that I personally admire, and it makes your connection with us here an even stronger one. And for those of us in the church, we have well and truly entered the door of that steel vault. May the unique inspiration that you derive from the church never be exhausted, and I look forward to the future so that I may admire your forthcoming works of art. In Christ, Father Paul Hatchelazis.
Thank you all very much for joining us today. The Allentown Art Museum's exhibit of Antonakos' The Room Chapel and the Chapel of the Heavenly Ladder will continue through Sunday, September 30th. We hope that you can come and experience both works before they close. This Zoom production will be posted on the museum's site at allentownartmuseum.org and on the artists at stephenantonakos.com. We would like to thank all the friends and colleagues who contributed to these readings, and we appreciate you for tuning in. Until next time.